Josh Terry, welcome to the Development by David podcast. How are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for having me.
Like I said before we hit record, it is genuinely a real privilege. Over the last few months, you've probably become one of my most engaged with accounts. I've seen you absolutely everywhere. You've taken TikTok by storm, Instagram Reels by storm. I've signed up for your newsletter. I visit your websites and have absolutely rinsed the archive of podcasts that you have. I've rarely seen someone show up with such intent and deliver value in such a consistent manner. Like your quality of content, it never drops or it never misses a beat. Like every single sentence that you speak about hits home. I have to. What I struggle with most about your content, in fact, is that I miss. So I gain a really good insight from one sentence, and then I miss the second and third amazing insights because I'm too busy ruminating on the previous. So I'm pausing your content at every second. So and it's also really nice to see you kind of almost face on too, which is great. How do you develop that content? Like, what is your strategy for delivering such? And like I said, it's really rare to see like such high fidelity content time and time again in a consistent manner. How do you do that?
Thank you. That's very meaningful to hear. Um, I'd say there's a couple different factors. Part of it's personality. You have to weigh that in, and part of it's education. Part of it's experience. So the personality is I'm very creatively oriented. I'm super open personality. I grew up in the art world. So I'm prone to going scatterbrained, if you will. But along with going scatterbrained, in order to survive, you also have to learn how to connect things back together again, right? So that became something that I could do, and it's my specialty. I've gotten pretty good at taking information from separate places and finding connections between them. So something that's, for example, in one industry and something that's in another industry, I like to find the commonalities between them. Something that's in one relationship and another relationship, I like to see what is the same between them that makes them tick, right? Same with how people work. I love connecting the dots. Um, and then I also spent a very long time writing a song every day. So within that process, there is a lot of exercise and ideation that has to occur. So the practice of coming up with ideas, right? And in the music world, it's pretty well known that if you do this, if you're a songwriter who writes a song every day, you get pretty darn good at writing songs. Um, but B, by the end of the process, if you do this until you're good at writing songs, by the end of the process, you almost can't stop the ideas. They start coming, while you're driving, and you're like, I'm on the highway, I can't pull over. what is this? I need this idea, I want it, but I can't utilize it. They start to pop in your mind all over the place, and it takes immense work to get there, but you can do it. You can get to that point where you can, be sitting at some bar with some friends, and they ask you to come up with ideas, and you can just point at the random objects in the bar, and that now they're all song ideas, right? You can get to that level of association if you practice. I did many word association exercises and stuff when I was younger. And then I suffered a lot. So when I was in my early 20s, I still had a lot to learn, and I did a lot of things wrong. And I struggled with finances and uh, depression, anxiety, fatigue, physical health, all sorts of things. And that was a bit of a, I guess the word would be crucible, that helped me learn what's really useful, right? When you're struggling, you can only apply things that are useful. You have to let go of all the other things, the ideas and beliefs that are fun, but they aren't helping you. You don't get to have those when you're struggling. You need to have useful ones if you want to get less struggling. So I had that experience, and then yeah, I'd say another thing was the education, which was, I was big bookworm when I was young, and went to college when I was 15, and then I had a secondary education in podcasts.
Talk to me about how podcasts kind of brought you out of that period of suffering. How did they unlock a superpower in you?
Well, I had a pretty broad education as a kid, so I had a lot of information, right? So there was a lot of raw potential there in terms of just knowing stuff. I mean, I far from know everything, but I learned quite a bit. And then the beauty of podcasts, I think, is podcasters are generally trying to find the truth, and they're generally biased towards a useful truth. And I think the concept of useful truth is really, really important. It's the idea of, okay, it's one level to say this thing is true and I believe it, but another level is believing this thing is true results in like direct utility in my life, right? So if you can align something that is true and that if you believe it's true, it will help you, then you really get to go somewhere. And podcasters seem to be biased in the direction of finding those types of truths because it's generally just a bunch of people trying to figure out how to do stuff better, and they're chatting, right? So I got to listen to, the most successful people in the world chat about how to be more successful. And so I filtered all of my baseline education through that. And I started to come up with the more practical decisions on how I wanted to live my life.
What I love about you is that you came to those practical decisions, embodied them yourself, improved your own life, and then went on to share that with others. Do you think if you hadn't suffered, you would be less propelled to work as a life coach? You must have understood the essence and the impact that this self work did for you and wanted to be generous with it.
I'm not sure. Um, when people ask me why I am a life coach, uh, the different reasons I give are one, people ask. I like to joke that they said I love you first. People just started to say, "Hey, can you coach me?" And I'd say, "Okay." And if you're gonna start a business, you might as well go with the one that people are asking you to start. So it became what I do. But beyond that, I've always been drawn to figuring stuff out and then helping other people figure it out, right? I was always that guy as a kid. Like my friends would come to me, and they go, "I've got this problem." And I go, "Ooh, let's figure it out," right? I just have that tendency, that desire, right? So there's some of that. And then I after college, I first just got a job in the construction industry, but I very quickly became the trainer in that job. And then I became a music teacher. So I was a teacher in some form for almost all of my adult working life. And most of it was teaching music to youngsters. And I teach at any age, but it's mostly like 8 to 15. And when you teach somebody young how to do something, if you're paying attention, you'll pretty quickly notice that teaching them that thing is 1% of the experience. Or maybe the solid 80-20 thing. It's 20% of the experience. It's a minority. The rest of it is getting them into a state where they would be able to learn. So, you get a 14-year-old girl that's, just come to an after-school piano lesson, and she's just broken up with her first boyfriend, and she's just had the new experience of, being viciously taken down by a social circle. She has a sugar crash, and there's some issue with the parents at home, right? That's what you're getting. You're not getting some blank slate that's like, oh, teacher, teach me. You're getting absolute mess in front of you, sorted out, right? And so that's what I would do is, the a lot of the lesson would be, okay, let's figure out how to be sane a little bit. And then, if we have 5 minutes left, let me see if I can give you some actual musical information, right? And the funny thing is if you do this, they'll absorb more musical information than if you spend the whole half hour trying to give them musical information. Because what state a human is in really changes how they absorb stuff. And these were all things that I was trying to apply in my own life, the things that I was teaching these kiddos, right? Just basic steps of, okay, well, are you about to pass out from a sugar crash? Let's see if we can do something about that. Like, let's fix these 5 other problems that are making you crazy. Let's, like, what do we do? By the end of it, my number 1 assignment was, kid, go climb a tree. There's not enough children climbing trees these days. It's really sad. That's the ultimate mental health hack. But as I was doing this, I was getting reps over and over again on just the basics of human development, right? The basics of getting a human functional and moving them forward one tiny step. And now I do that for CEOs and entrepreneurs and content creators and, influencers and so on. And it turns out there's not a lot of difference, between a 12-year-old and a CEO, because the basics of how we function are pretty universal.
That is super insightful. The rationale or the idea that my brain came to there was that it must be so much harder to work with CEOs and influencers because they have developed a lifetime of habits that you might have to unwind, whereas a 10 to 12-year-old isn't a blank slate but has less of these tendencies because they've went through less motions. Is there a kind of dichotomy between the two in that aspect?
So it depends. Which will be my answer to a lot of things. Sorry, I'm that guy. But it really depends, because for me it was actually a relief. I found that I could actually help more, get better results, do more with entrepreneurs, CEOs, content creators, that basically anybody that's building stuff, creative and ambitious. That's kind of my realm. I could do more with them than I could with the kiddos. And I've thought about this a lot because there's so many similarities in what I did, and I really struggled at the previous job. It didn't feel right for me, and I wondered, like, why was I so unhappy with it? And part of it was just, tapping into your full potential. I knew that I could do more than what I was doing, and that matters. But the main things that I realized was I needed to be too gentle for my own psychology with the kids. I had to constantly be very careful with myself. I had to hold myself back and be just a little bit more quiet than I wanted to be, and just a little bit nicer than I wanted to be. And it's subtle, but it mattered. Because the kids just needed a softer touch, right? They needed gentleness, right? And so when you're working with an adult, you can be a little bit more clear on, we are meeting under the context of good intentions. Now that you know that, I'm going to say something difficult, right? So with a kid, context of good intentions is very dependent on the moment, because one, a lot of times the kid isn't where they are because they wanted to be there. They're where they are because their parent put them there, right? So they're in a situation where they have to cope with it and decide for themselves if they can survive it, right? Um, and I mean, that might sound extreme, but it's really not. Like, that's what kids are trying to do, is survive. And so, if they're in a room with an adult, they have to take every meeting as it comes, where it's like, okay, is this guy like gonna be nice to me, or is he gonna like crush my ego, or like is he gonna make me look like an idiot in front of all of my social circle, right? With an adult, you can establish a little bit of that context ahead of time, where they go, okay, I understand that you're trying to help me, I understand that we're on good terms, and now, yes, I welcome the difficult thing, tell me the difficult thing, and then we talk about it. And that piece was really, really important for me, as I thrive under those conditions, is establishing positive intent, and then exploring the difficult subject. And then I think there was one other piece, something along the lines of what was it? Just I'm a little bit more prone to the intellectual side of things, right? I like to talk through things logically. I think I often teach intuition to a lot of these high level people. We actually are talking about developing intuition, but we're usually talking about it from an intellectual framework. That's where we start. And because for me, it's easier to start there. It's easier to get everybody on the same page by just exploring things logically. And you need to start from a different framework when you're working with kids. You need to start from the emotional and intuitive frameworks.
Given the journey that you've been on and the amount of people that you've been able to inspire, both through the coaching aspect of things and your broader audience, which is in its millions, how does it feel to be such a trusted advisor to these people? Does it feel like a heavy set of tools in your hand?
It's an honor. It's it's really meaningful. It feels really good. And it's very scary.
Why is that?
Well, because I'd like to not misguide anyone when I can avoid it. I mean, surely people will listen to things that I say and come to incorrect conclusions. That's part of the game of life. But, I would like to avoid it. I don't like seeing people come to harm, right? And by the nature of choosing to help, you're choosing to engage in an activity where things could go wrong. And so I have to accept to some degree that because we're trying to solve a problem, sometimes we won't. So that's very scary. It's very scary to do this. It's choosing to go down the water slide. And it's a big challenge. But I find it a very exciting, hopeful, optimistic one. Yeah, there's always parts of me that is, afraid, like, oh, well, the imposter syndrome, am I worthy of this type of thing? And then, oh, well, what if I'm actually going to be a moron in this circumstance here, and oh, wow, this person respects me, and if I say the wrong thing here, that might steer them wrong, and am I just going to flippantly say something that, just sends somebody on a death spiral? All those things come to mind. But when I weigh it, another thing comes to mind, which is it's something I talk with clients a lot about, is this funny phenomenon of, if you're concerned about that, then you don't need to be concerned about that. That it's a funny phrase, but you can break this one down to a lot of interesting things. If you're concerned about that, you don't need to be concerned about that. So I'll give you an example. So, um, if you're a really kind, open, loving, nice person, and I say, you need to start establishing boundaries and you need to be a little bit more aggressive and start talking about what you want. Try to get what you want in life. Their first concern, their first instinctual concern is going to be, ooh, well, if I do that, then I might hurt somebody. And I might turn into a jerk. I might be cruel. And the reality is they're so far on the other end of the spectrum that's the last thing they need to be worried about. Because if they choose to set some boundaries and choose to start speaking up about what they want, they are going to do it in the most empathetic manner. They're going to do it in the most kindly manner. That it's never going to be an issue because they're going to be so concerned with being that person. Now, if you tell that person, you know what, you should be more open and loving, and you should let people be more, and you should help others more. Their instinctual response to that will be, you know what, you're right. Yeah, I should be nice, and they shouldn't, because they're already a doormat. And then you can flip this entire thing to somebody that is disagreeable and aggressive and do the same thing. And, if you tell them to be nice, then they're going to go, well, then maybe my needs won't get met. They'll have a bunch of concerns about why they shouldn't do that. And if you tell them, that they should be aggressive, they'll be like, oh, that's a great idea. That's how you solve problems. And so we're always, we always have to take into account our bias of like what our predisposition is, and whatever it is, we need to balance it a little bit. So whatever you're concerned about oftentimes is the thing that you don't need to be concerned about.
I love that. I think that may be my trailer clip. It seems like people might come to you in pain, right? And then it seems like a life coach helps them navigate between a dichotomy of two types of pain. Familiar pain, which they're already existing in. They have bad habits, bad relationships, bad routines, bad inner monologue, but it's familiar, so it's easy. But as a life coach, you might guide them to unfamiliar pain, the practice of trying something new, a new habit, a new relationship, a new discipline, a new mental model. Because it's new and novel, it's painful because they haven't experienced it before. They can't rely on previous patterns to comfort them. But on the other side of that, there's reward. So it seems like from a life coach point of view, it must be hard trying to purvey a message that the unfamiliar pain is an act of kindness, not an act of this is not working. I'm not a great life coach. I'm not making good decisions on your behalf. It must be really hard to navigate and balance both those kind of facets of pain.
Yeah. I do it two ways. I use two things to navigate that. One is the concept of small steps. It's a simple thing, but it matters a lot. It's how do you break something down into small realistic steps that you would voluntarily take? That's the first thing. And then the other is the concept of safe discomfort. So a lot of, and this actually ties in some ways with the what you're concerned about, you don't need to be concerned about. There are a lot of popular motivational speakers that talk about push yourself, right? And the people that get into that message, they're like, yeah, just push yourself at all costs. You got to try as hard as you can, so on and so forth. And, well, what happens with those people? Well, lots of burnout, lots of self-destruction, lots of damage. And then there's another camp that says you need to love yourself. Self-care. You need to take care of yourself. You need to ask yourself if this is right for you. And what these people do is they protect themselves into oblivion. There's a term I heard recently to describe it, which was safetyism, right? Is this idea of just like, well, that's dangerous, and that's gonna stress me. I don't want to deal with that. That's not good. And you can go down this rabbit hole of just getting safer and safer and safer until you're in the most dangerous place you can be. And I think the middle ground between those two things is understanding this idea of safe discomfort, which is you need to push yourself like a parent would push a child. You need to take responsibility for yourself and parent yourself in such a way that you examine your potential options and you look at the thing that you could do, or the set of things that you could do, and you say, that looks like it would kill me. I'm not going to do it. That looks like a cop-out. I'm not going to do that. That looks difficult. And it looks like something that I wouldn't be harmed by, but it would make me very uncomfortable. And if I did it, I would probably be better. And then you don't do that one either. What you do is you look for the one that's a lot like that, but it's small enough that even if you fail at it, you would be better. So you pick the thing that's like, okay, this is going to make me uncomfortable. And if I succeed, I'm going to learn something. And if I fail, I'm going to learn something. And no matter what, I win. Now it's an undeniable plus. And you've managed the risks. And you say, okay, well, now there's nothing left for me to do, but just go ahead and do it. And when you've fully done this in your mind, it's generally something that you can manage. Actually, if you can't manage it, you haven't done this. That's the real truth, right? If you're like procrastinating on that thing that you're like, I know I, should be doing this, some part of you is afraid that it's going to kill you. So some part of you is afraid that there's like some set of unmanageable risks connected to that, whether through doing it or, through the things that you're not going to be doing while doing that thing, right? There's something there that feels dangerous, right? To the point that it's too much. So you have to look at it like you would a parent would look at a child, because that set of things that I just described is what a parent does for a child. A parent looks at the child and they assess the child's skill levels. And you go, okay, that kiddo can't swim on his own. So I'm not going to leave him at the pool unattended. Right? But I will get in the pool and set the child on the edge of the pool and say, hey, buddy, want to come give me a hug? From 2 feet away. And that is a manageable risk. And it is a safe discomfort where that child is going to push, is going to take what feels like a risk. And in a way it is. It's an act of faith towards the parent, right? But it's something that isn't going to destroy them, but it will help them grow. Safe discomfort. It's very, very important.
I absolutely love that concept, Josh. And it kind of braces against failure and I know you failed in your tenure on this
Yes, I've
planet,
failed. I've done that.
and I love how you frame it as not an attack on your identity and who you are, but an opportunity to receive information. And I guess what you brought to life there, that example of the parent allowing the child to move across the pool towards them to give them a hug, the amount of information or the information that the parent gets from that is my child capable of completing this task yet? No or yes. But it's easy for a parent to think, my child can't swim, my child isn't a swimmer, my child isn't comfortable in water, and portrays it as an attack on their identity and who they are. How can we use failure as a mechanism to receive information opposed to a mechanism to destruct our personality and our persona and our identity?
You have to train failure.
Like reps in a gym?
Yeah. So there's a book, Mindset, by Carol Dweck. It's a good one. And it talks about the difference between two mindsets. One is the simple belief that I am either good or bad at things. And the other is, if I work on things, I will get better. And if you hold one of these beliefs, your life will take a set of paths. And if you hold the other one, it'll take a different set of paths. And the belief, I am either good or bad at things, is the dangerous one. It's the one that can destroy your life, right? This is what happens when Timmy comes home from the chess match and he gets the gold. You go, Timmy, you did such a good job. I'm so proud of you. You're so good at chess. And now Timmy doesn't ever want to play chess again, because what if he loses? But if instead you say, Timmy, you did such a good job. You worked really hard at that game. I can't believe how, you won and you lost over and over and over again so much that you got better, and that's how you won. Well, now Timmy wants to play as many games of chess as he can, right?
I've heard you use this example where instead of rewarding your child for passing an exam, treat her to ice cream the day before the exam for studying.
Yes. Reward the effort and put it in context, because that's what creates that belief. So with failure, what you have to do is you have to give yourself manageable reps, right? And the way a lot of us think about failure is, we try to do a big thing and then we fail, and it's like, oh, what a disaster. And that sucks. You shouldn't do that. You should go do a thing that you can fail and it would be fine. That's what you should fail at. Because what will happen if you do this on a repeated basis is eventually you will realize that it's okay to fail, right? And also, failing at big things when you're not ready is just phenomenally stupid. There, I said it. I'll disagree with all of the motivational speakers that say fail epically. I mean, I agree in premise with what they're talking about. But the thing is we all have a current state of our mental capability and mental strength, right? We all have a failure that would crush us. Maybe it's a divorce. Maybe it's the loss of a business that we spent 30 years building. Maybe it's our country coming under siege. Maybe it's the death of a spouse. It could be something, and I realize some of these are tragedies, but when you're in them, you can process them as failures. It's the same thing. We all have stuff that would break us, because we're all on a path to development. We're all learning. I'm not saying you can't transcend those things. You can. But just let's be real. For some people, if they get fired from McDonald's, they're done. And for others, if they get fired from McDonald's, they go, oh, thank God, cool. And, oh, I see, I just pissed off the manager, and that's why it happened. Cool, I've learned, right? We all have a set of things that if we fail at that thing, we're done. And we shouldn't be directly addressing those things, because why? What you should be doing is training to become capable of addressing those things. And the way you do that is by failing epically at the little things, right? Is go, okay, well, here's that silly hobby that, I always had a little bit of an interest in. Let's go to the meetup and just embarrass ourselves with the ignorance, And, instead of asking that girl out that you're just absolutely terrified of, why don't you make eye contact with somebody for once while you're walking down the street? Like, please, just eye contact, just once. You can fail at that and then just go, oh, that was embarrassing that, I made this weird face, and let me try again, right? Don't go try for the one job that you can't survive without. Try out for 20 jobs that you don't care about at all. Lose the interview on all of them. And you won't, because by the 20th one, you're going to care so little that, you're going to look so confident that you're going to be hired no matter what your credentials are. The way to flip your mindset on failure is, one, know that you can. Know that failure can be an educational resource. And then once you know it, go try the type of things that would make it such. Go try the type of things that would educate you if you failed. And then over time, more and more of different types of failures will be educational.
I wonder how much the lack of appetite towards failure is predicated on social media. We only get to see online superstars in their realm perform at the highest levels with almost what seems like a degree of perfectionism. So there seems to be a huge chasm between who we are in that realm and the superstars that precede us. But we don't get to see the sacrifices and the failures that they have made to become the person that they are. So I wonder how much of that is a catalyst for our lack of appetite to fail. But not only that, most of what we do as this kind of new digital kind of generation, most of what we do, all of our endeavors are online. So perhaps it's the inability to want to fail in public that also catalyzes that.
I'm going to be super opinionated on this one.
I'd love that.
I think that our struggle to let ourselves fail has next to nothing to do with social media. I think that blaming our inability to, step out in the limelight and fail publicly, being blamed on social media is like blaming video games for violence. Violence has been around a long time. And we've been escaping judgment from others for a long time. And I think that our ability to do that, our ability to bravely attempt things that could fail, I think it becomes more common in a society when individualized education teaches it. And when that individual education doesn't teach it, we stop doing it because it's scary.
By
It's
individual
really
education, do you mean by parents or do you mean in a classroom setting?
Yeah, both.
Okay.
All of the above. I mean, when on a fundamental level, a generation knows that that's important and they encourage it within the youth. They try to, on a fundamental level, stimulate that activity. It starts to grow. And then I think what happens is then, maybe a generation or two benefits from that, and then they forget that it's important, and then they get shy. And they go, well, I don't really want to fail in front of others, right? And for good reason. Failure in front of others What we translate that as is it's the fear of death, because we are afraid that we will make a mistake, be judged unworthy, be ostracized from our tribe, and starve to death. On
It's an
an
evolutionary thing, right?
yes, on an evolutionary level, that is what that is. It's a big deal. It's not a little deal. It's a big one. So it's really understandable that we would try to escape it. It's really understandable they would try not to take risks, right? Also, risks, evolutionarily speaking, not so great. Generally speaking, is not super safe. And let's be real, like there are infinitely more risks that will kill you than risks you can take that won't kill you, right? So there's a lot of danger out there. But fundamentally, for people to do this, I believe they simply need to be educated on it. It's a thing that we have to learn and discover. And we have to either educate ourselves on it or be educated, and preferably both.
On the contrary, can we fetishize failure? If
Yes.
reiteration becomes a reward and the measure becomes the outcome, how can we enjoy the final destination or even recognize when it exists?
Oh yeah, yeah. So I get this in clients all the time, because I work with clients that are fairly successful, right? And so they have hit a point of success, and the way you hit your first couple of points of success is by failing your way there. Like you have to do that. But if you're just failing all the time, it's quite a grind on your psyche and body, right? It can be, it's hard work to fail a bunch. And what they do is they learn that failure works. They learn these lessons of, yeah, failure's got to be educational. I need to move towards the discomfort. And they get in the habit of just like, I'm always going to move towards discomfort. I'm just going to fail constantly. Fail, 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 fail. I'm going to move as fast as I can. And what happens is they drain themselves, they get tunnel vision, they turn into workaholics, and they get stupid. Right? Because when you have tunnel vision, you make dumb mistakes. So there's the other side of it, which is, sometimes you have to set boundaries even on how much you push yourself, right? It's not just boundaries on, like, I need to get myself disciplined to go work hard. We also have to discipline ourselves into not working too much. We have to, discipline ourselves into not taking too many crazy risks, right? And that's a common dilemma for people that have reached some point of success, because once again, you have to learn the lesson to get some success. But if you want to get more success, you have to balance yourself out. You have to become a more balanced, more insightful, more wise individual. And to do that, you can't fetishize failure.
I wonder if by using the inversion mental model, it would be easier to recognize that. If you were to ask a CEO, how do I kill the company? Well, they would answer that by, well, overworking, taking time off, not being a good leader, not taking responsibility for the outcomes. If you were to invert that question by asking how would I kill the company, perhaps the failure would have less of a propensity to be fetishized if you were just to invert it.
Yes, and they can answer that question. That's a very good point, because they can answer it. The problem is it's still trained in, right? Because most of our behavior is habitual, right? So what you just described is a great way to point it out. It's a great way to bring it to the light, to go, hey, like this isn't gonna work. You're supposed to have employees. You're not supposed to be burning the candle at both ends, right? You're supposed to be coming up with insightful leadership decisions. And so that gets the point across, but it doesn't change the behavior, because the behavior is based in your reward systems.
Mm.
So to start moving towards a balanced life, you have to engage in different types of safe discomfort. You have to engage in discomfort that you once thought was comfort, right? You have to go finish off your to-do list and just sit somewhere for an hour outside in peace and see what comes up. Which that's what your brain used to call laziness, but now it's your job.
The reason I'm laughing, Josh, is because I resonate with that entirely. I did a solo Q&A podcast the other day, and one of the questions was, "Are you happy right now?" And I really struggled to answer that because I
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
take the time to stop and ask myself that question. I've not asked myself that question for so long, and it's because I fell into like two crevices: achieving and mistaking happiness for achievement, or the second one being overstimulating myself and never giving myself silence. Because because of that first facet, achievement meant I couldn't be lazy, and I tied thinking and stopping, reflecting, meditating. I tied that as procrastination. We live in this world of this world of toxic productivity where we're told think less, do more. And I really haven't, unfortunately, embodied that. And that's why I was laughing so much by the sentiment that you brought to life there.
Yeah. Okay. So I personally, I don't want to call it toxic productivity. I want to call it lesson one, right? Because there's so many things in this world that we have to learn, and then we have to learn something else, right? Because you can't just not do anything in the world. You need to be a productive member of society because it's good. It's not because the man is getting you to do it, not because of any overarching evil narrative of capitalism. It's it's because it's meaningful to do something of value for the world. It feels good. But that's one piece. And you have to learn these other pieces if you want to become the best version of yourself, if you want to keep growing. So if you've learned these ideas of productivity, where it's like, okay, I've learned how to apply these things. Well, that was a big accomplishment, right? Because most people don't learn that. Let's be real. Like, you might see it in social media, but what you see in social media is not the majority of society. There's a lot of humans out there. The majority of humans haven't learned that baseline thing of like, okay, you got to push really hard. You got to, develop this work ethic. You got to learn how to be a productive member of society, so on and so forth. And it's just a lot of really hard lessons. So you got to learn those, but you also have to learn these ideas of, okay, you are an individual and you need to care for yourself, once again, as if you have responsibility for yourself. And you need to set boundaries around yourself so that not everybody takes everything you have, right?
I
And
love the quote of, "You don't pour from a half cup, nor do you pour from a full cup. You pour from the saucer in which it overspills."
yes, yes, you have to create an abundant life for yourself, right? You have to, and a big part of that is setting boundaries on what you do and what you allow, right? So in that comes these lessons of sometimes stopping the work, sometimes having a moment of silence, having a moment of quiet. And I work with a lot of aggressive people and a lot of ambitious people. I mean, the ambitious folks are kind of my specialty. And what will always come up is like, oh, I'm being a pussy if I do that, right? It's like I'm weak. I'm weak if I stop. And you can debunk this so quickly. All you have to do is say, well, can you stop? And if the answer is no, then you're weak because you can't stop. You're not weak because you can get the job done. That's the thing that you're addicted to. That's the productivity is the thing that you like. That's the chocolate. There comes a point in your process of maturity, where stepping back, getting perspective, balancing yourself out. Yeah, if you did that when you were 12, maybe that would be you being lazy. Maybe. Because maybe you needed a different lesson then. But when you're 25, 35, 45, and you're a hyper ambitious creative that's built a bunch of stuff, you don't want to stop. So I would challenge that you are weak for not having the capacity to let yourself take on those behaviors. And that's where you have to develop your strength. It's a flip of perspective.
Again, leaning on my question around familiar and unfamiliar pain. Are these ambitious, aggressive people that you work with, do you think their impulses are to accelerate harder and work as productively as they do because they are scared to stop? They will be presented with an unfamiliar truth or unfamiliar realization if they stop and give themselves the time to self-evaluate and meditate. Do you think they use this kind of productivity as a vice?
At the core, they just want to go Genghis Khan on the world. Like there's a piece of them that's like, yeah, I just want to do all the things, right? Like it's a really good thing. It's coming from a really good place. I really believe that. Because people do great things, right? And they like to. So that's the root. It's a positive thing.
I mean, the reason we're doing what we're doing is enabled by technology that was probably founded by someone with a mindset like that.
Oh yeah, it was founded by somebody that I think Jordan Peterson said there are people that if you drop them off in the wilderness with an axe, they'll just start chopping down trees and they won't stop. Yeah, like the internet was for sure made by people like that. and that's right and good and valuable and it's beautiful. You know, it's this outward force. It's an amazing thing. What you were talking about though is legitimate, and that is a fear that comes up when you never allow yourself to sit with your own thoughts, when you never allow yourself to pull back, when you never, and I shouldn't even say the word allow, I should say when you never take the time to do these things, when you never commit to do these things of self-reflection, you know, waiting, patience, you know, considering your decisions so that you can make insightful ones, you know, all these things that are a pullback from that hyper forward motion. The fear comes when we never do it, and we have negative cycles or negative loops, negative thoughts that run through our mind that build over time just because life, right? And then we have a moment of rest and then we feel that mental discomfort. And then we don't like it, so we make another to-do list and we get to work again. And so if you do this a couple of times, pretty soon, taking a break, the silence is the big black. It's the big scary, right? Because that's where you've put all of your fear.
If I were to ask you how you would describe the sensation of happiness, how would you describe it? Or is it a sensation or is it a state?
A momentary symptom of a positive state.
It's fleeting though, right? It's not everlasting or ever long.
Yeah. It's a symptom though. That's how I like to describe happiness. It's a symptom of other things. And a big one is state. Yeah, just what state you're in.
Because I was asked on my podcast, the Soul Q&A, are you happy? And like I said, I couldn't give an answer because of that. And I thought, well, happiness is overrated, or aiming for happiness is overrated. And I began to say, living a life of regret minimization is better. But then I came across one of your videos, of course, that kind of left me at a crossroads. And it was a video of you around a campfire, I believe. And you speak about you focus less or put less intention on doing what's right or wrong, but what you want. And now I'm kind of post rationalizing all my regrets that I've done because I can say, well, it was what I wanted to do at the time, whether it was sleep with an ex girlfriend or booze before an exam, because that's the bodily sensation that I was wanting at the time. And that's what that version of me needed or wanted. So now I'm at this crossroads of whether I want to minimize regret or just do what I want in the moment. Whether but it's hard to kind of kind of segregate that between an impulse and a value led decision.
Yeah.
So
So
I'm at a huge crossroads because of your content on that now.
uh uh sorry about that. Uh um okay, so it's several things actually that you brought up here. And this thing about the happiness not being a good thing to pursue. So the core message there is really valuable, right? That's the thing about, like, no, you need to pursue a meaningful life. Happiness is fleeting, so if you pursue it, eventually you're just going down this deep dark cave. It's not good. That's true. But also remember that you brought up that idea of fetishizing failure. You can fetishize not seeking happiness. You can fetishize, yeah, I'm just gonna pursue meaning, and I'm just gonna suffer and struggle, and it's gonna be so good, and I've done the right thing. But it's like, no. The point of that theory was to say, if you pursue happiness, you're gonna be miserable. And if you pursue meaning, if you put a little bit more weight on meaning than you do on happiness, then you're likely to be, it lowers the odds that you will be miserable.
And
But if
probably
you,
heightens the odds that you experience happiness as a byproduct.
yes, and it raises the possibility that you will experience happiness. Yeah, totally true. And then, but if you fetishize the meaning, the struggle, the purpose, the suffering, does that point you towards more happiness? No. It leads you down another dark rabbit hole, right? So it's about holding these things in your mind in the right place, where it's like, okay, like, I need to not just chase after happiness, because I know now, like, if I do that, things will get shallower and shallower, and things will get darker and darker, which means I need to go towards something meaningful. I need to do something with purpose. And then from there, I'll have a lot of possibilities of good things that could happen. But I need to be open to those good things. And I want to continue to optimize my life in such a way that those good things could happen. Those happy moments could happen. So pursue meaning. And then if you like Ferraris, buy one. Pursue meaning. And if you like hot fudge sundaes, get one. Right? Like, it's like, enjoy the things.
It
Let
reminds
the
me
good
that
come out.
it reminds me that our desires are like channels cut through the landscape of life. Water, our behavior automatically flows where these arteries have been carved. But I'm also told that by Naval Ravikant or some other people online that Naval like desires a curse.
Okay, all right.
O- o- o-
It's inevitable. We have to get into this because
like
this is important.
what was another one I've heard? Happiness is not positive thoughts or negative thoughts. It's the absence of desire.
Wanting something is a contract with yourself to be unhappy until you get it.
That one
That's
as well.
that's the
That's the Naval one, right?
the thing. That's the Naval thing. Yeah. Okay. True. And true and, right? It's a very important sentence to know. True and. wanting something opens up the possibility of being unhappy that you don't have it. That's true. That's a different way of phrasing that contract. Contract is super, like, it's inevitable. If you want something, you're going to be sad, right? But the thing is desire is also a fundamentally human thing that you cannot live without. Yes, when the first two amoebas mashed together, maybe they didn't need desire to reproduce. But from then on, they had to actually want it for it to happen. They had to actually want food in order to survive. There's a really common thing that's talked about where people say, oh, you don't want that. You just need, you don't need that. You just want it. And what they're trying to say is, oh, like you're just like going after a shallow thing, right? You've heard that before, right?
Yeah, 100%.
That is, it doesn't make any sense when you actually dive deeper into it. Because let's figure it out. Like, okay, what do you need? You need food, water, clothing, shelter, right? Okay. It falls apart as soon as you say, why?
Because you want it.
Because you want to live. If you didn't want to live, you wouldn't need food, water, clothing, and shelter. Your wants define your needs. Your wants are more important than your needs. There are many, many people who have gone to war and died because of something that they cared about. That defined their needs. They let go of food, water, clothing, and shelter because something was more important to them. And that created the needs. The need to fight, to protect their people. So wants are more important. And to only think of them as this shallow thing is incredibly destructive. Because what it makes you do is it makes you stop listening to them. And if you stop listening to them, they get stupid. Because desire is a muscle that can be trained. And it can be made stronger and it can be made weaker. And so, and it can become more insightful and less. And if you think of your desires as just this shallow thing that, only makes you do bad stuff, it makes you worse, then it will. Because you will be constantly boxing up and bottling up your desires and ignoring them until they become this like tiny little creature like Voldemort inside of Harry Potter's head. But if instead you go, oh, desire is something that can grow and build and become more wise. Well, now you're going to start listening to it. You're going to start going, what do I want? And then you can try going after it. And maybe you get a terrible result. And you go, oh, maybe I don't want that. Right? The way to explain this is this part about desire being trainable is super simple. If you want to touch a hot stove and you touch a hot stove, then now you don't want to touch a hot stove. Desire is trainable. So if you want 20 cookies and then you eat 20 cookies and you feel sick, you don't want 20 cookies. You might want 20 cookies next week. I get it. But the opportunity for learning is there. Right? If you want to sleep with your ex and you get a bad, you go ahead and you get a bad result. Now you go, okay, maybe I learned something here. And like, yeah, maybe I have the craving next time, but it's not really deeply rooted in my desire. And the way I classify cravings is desire. And desire is something that when you get it, you are more. And a desire is something that you want, and when you get it, you are more. A craving is something that you want, and when you get it, you are less. And if you start actively engaging in your desires, pretty soon you can develop the insight to see which is which, and you can train it, and you can start to have powerful desires that are strong, that drive you and make you a better person.
Oh, I think I read this amazing article by you a couple of weeks ago, and it was something. Oh, was it one of your videos? But it was something along the lines of going after what you want has utility, because it like
Yes.
reinforces some sort of chemicals within our body. With it must be dopamine that you're referring
Yes.
to. What
It's
do you
many
mean?
things.
What do you mean by that?
So going after what you want does give you dopamine, but it also, if you get what you want, it gives you serotonin, because now you are a capable person. Now your status is higher. You have done the thing that you wanted, which is what we all want. Like, that part's not complicated. But going after your desire has utility because of that thing I was saying about desire being trainable. If you go after what you want, you will get the clearest feedback loop on reality. Because what you want is honest. It's not lying. You might lie about what you want, but what you want is true. It's an undeniable thing. And if you start to tap into it and notice it and start to act on it, I mean, sure, there are some really terrible things you could think that you want, and maybe you shouldn't act on those. Be an adult. You can navigate this stuff. But if you engage with it and you go, I think I want this. Now I'm going to, on purpose, go after it because I want it. Then you'll get a result. And that result is the thing that teaches you. It's how you grow. So people that don't engage with their desire, they don't grow as quickly as someone who will actively look at it.
And now I realize why the semantics of the word desire is so important. If we label it as a negative feat, then when we achieve it, then we'll feel lambasted and we'll feel ashamed for achieving it, and then we won't reiterate or pursue our desires ever again. But if we do have desires, we chase after it and get that serotonin and dopamine because we have pursued the endeavor and received the reward. And if we coddle that with a positive semantic, then we'll do it again and reiterate, and we'll get more, we'll become built for more, and we'll add to society as a whole. And now I realize through what you brought to life there, the semantics are so important of how we frame desire.
It really matters. Because, I mean, if you look at Eastern thought, desire is one of the fundamental energies that runs through everything. It's very, very important. And if you ignore it, it gets weaker. But if you pay attention to it, it turns into an unstoppable force. And if you're engaging with it and working to help it learn, to learn with it, really, because it's you, right? If you seek to learn as you build that desire, you become a wise, unstoppable force.
I'm going to have to listen to this podcast time and time again to meditate on all these incredible revelations that I'm having because of you, Josh. This is just incredible. Given this journey that you've been on, given the circumstances that you once found yourself in your 20s when you were depressed, if you could go back and speak or coach that version of you, is there a fundamental, overarching message that you would like to give him?
I would say the number one message is very simple, which is it's so meaningful when you really, really know it, which is that things can get better, which is kind of tied back to the mindset thing of growth mindset versus static mindset. Simply the knowledge that things can get better, like really understand that. And then I would say learn how to take realistic next steps. Learn how to take the realistic best next step. And that's tied to the idea of safe discomfort and taking on a failure that you can digest, one that you can manage and learn from and grow. I think those are key components. And without those things, I never would have come out. And I think many people don't. But if you know those things, you can find a way forward. You can move forward. There's a lot of other things to learn, of course. But I think those are fundamentally important.
If this podcast is speaking to one of the listeners and they've found solace in your voice and your messaging and your hope, what can they expect from your work if they were to sign up?
On my website, stuff there. Yeah, so I have a website that is practiceofpurpose.com because I think that's what we should practice. And it's a way to work with me. There is a membership where there is a short course on mental models, frameworks, a lot on like what we talked about here. And then, chat rooms for us to connect on it. I do a lot of Q&A in there. And then I do like weekly live Q&As where we just work through a lot of these topics. It gets sometimes pretty individualized. And then also I've got some workshops coming up, and you can contact me about one-on-one coaching. Yeah.
Amazing, Josh. This has been one of the funnest podcasts that I've ever recorded. Again, like I said in my intro, every sentence was like a professional darts player throwing a dart. It landed and took me 2 or 3 seconds to catch up with. It was unbelievable. I know I'll revisit this for years to come, and I am very, very privileged and grateful and appreciative of your time and your wisdom and your generosity, Josh. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this.